a workshop series that is with Renew Appalachia and Regenerative Farms, and to help provide insight and resources for small farmers, primarily in Martin County, but throughout Eastern Kentucky. And what Renew Appalachia is, and what me and Lauren do here, is we are working to find new uses for reclaimed mine land, this site in Martin County, uh, that focus on regeneration and reforestation and community development and business incubation, which we see regenerative farming being a really key part of that. So for example, on the farm here, we do sheep production. We have some lambs expecting over the course of the next month that we use for invasive species management, but they also produce food and help with food security and create revenue streams and job opportunities in the county. And what this today's workshop series is the alphabet of all of the farming acronyms that we are going to learn and get to know. Because as all of us know, and as I definitely know, as you start to get into farming, there's so many acronyms and so many grants and organizations and different groups involved. And today, to talk to us about that is Spencer. Spencer is from KCARD, and he just did his introduction, but just a little brief reintroduction to. He has 7 years of experience working in agriculture, and works with KCARD. He used to be an engineer, and developed, tested, and redesigned agriculture and material handling equipment. And now he lends that expertise to help create business plans for farmers. And today we'll help be teaching us about all of the acronyms and alphabet soup involved in agriculture today. And in his not so free time, he also children. So that we thank you for taking time out today and helping us and teaching us all, and I'll be learning right along with you all. And if anyone has any questions afterwards or wants access to anything, they can contact Mary, who just gave her email, or Richard at renewappalachia.org, or team at renewappalachia.org as well, for further information. And for everyone who registered, whether you're here or not, we will be following up with you to give you some more information about our next workshop series. So now I'll hand it off to Spencer to begin us on the presentation. Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, thank you, Richard. Appreciate the introduction, and thanks to Mary, Clifford, and Richard, all three of you, for having us on to talk a little bit tonight. So I just first of all, I want to start off. Let me see if I can get my slideshow queued up here and share my screen. Let's see here. As much as I've been on Zoom, you'd think I could do this really quick, but it always takes me a second. Okay, so can you all see?
Yep,
do you all
good.
see the presentation there?
Looking good.
Good deal. Okay. All right. Well, what I would like to do. So first of all, I like to start off. Anytime there's two things, and I've got them both in this presentation that I like to do, I'll leave you in suspense for the second one until we get to it. But the first one is this slide that you see. I don't know if you all have. I remember growing up as a child of the 80s, whenever I would go into any farm dealership with my parents or with my dad or my grandpa, this would be a sign that would be in like every office of every salesman that I ever saw in Central or Southern Kentucky. So matter of fact, just before I get into it, the two kids that you see in this picture, they actually had them a couple of years ago redo this picture. And it was an old picture in the 80s. So I think they redid it like 5 or 6 years ago when they were in their 60s then. So anyway, I always thought this was a cool picture here. It's how I remember ag as a child. Maybe I just never had anybody to wear overalls with me to do it myself. But anyway, what I want to talk to you all tonight, what you see on the screen there is a list of acronyms that I want to cover with you all during our time together. As I'm going through this, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I just soon talk to him with you while we're in the moment. If that suits you all, that's fine with me. And then of course we should have a little bit of time left at the end. I don't think I'll take the whole time today, but um, I'll give a little bit of opportunity for people to ask questions at the end if they want to save them till then. But if you got one while we're going along, feel free to shout it out and we'll address it and then move on to the next thing. So the first thing that I want to do is just share a little bit about what I do. So I know Richard and Mary mentioned a little bit about K-Card when they were introducing me, but we're kind of a cool organization here, and it sounded like that everybody that I heard in the brief introduction before we started recording, everybody's from Kentucky, so that's good. This slideshow is tailored to Kentucky ag producers. There's a couple that I'm going to pull out at the end, but that aren't in the presentation. That's really just geared towards Eastern Kentucky. But the cool thing about K-Card, we cover the entire state, Eastern Kentucky, from Pikeville to Paducah, we cover it all, and then some. But the big part about what we do, we're a nonprofit. So kind of think of us as you're not, I guess the first thing I would say is that our services are free of charge. So if you come to us and you need help with developing your business, expanding your business, finding out what grants might be available to you, that's all part of what we can do at K-Card. And the fortunate thing is that through 2 funding opportunities that we apply for and receive each year, one being our United States Department of Ag Rural Cooperative Development Program, and then the other one being the Kentucky Ag Development Board. Both of those are acronyms that we're going to dive into a little bit further here in just a little bit. But programs through those organizations basically provide funding for us to be able to do the work that K-Card is a part of for free. So just know that if you have any questions for us, we're a phone call or an email away, and it's no charge for you to have our assistance. But we've been around now for we've just clocked over 20 years. I think 2003 or 4 was when we got started. So we're over 20 years into helping agriculture in our state, and working with farmers one-on-one. The primary thing that we're driven to do is to help provide those educational opportunities, technical assistance related to business development, business support services in the way of what grants might be available to apply for. All those things are what we're here to do for producers. And since it's an acronym talk, I started with us because we like acronyms so much that they're in our name. So that's really where K-Card comes from. The pretty neat thing that I think I also want to make sure you all know about is that if we need more time, like if you call us or send us an email and ask for our assistance, if it's something that we can do over a Zoom call, great. If we need to come meet around a kitchen table or meet you at a Denny's or an extension office or something like that, we're happy to do that too. So it's not just assistance from a screen. We're happy to sit around a table with you, shake hands, and figure out how we can best help you in your situation. So we've got people on staff that are like myself that do business plans. Like my core responsibility as a business development specialist is to help with those business plans, think through financials, and then talk about record keeping. So that's really what I do. And we've got other individuals that their job is to figure out what grant opportunities are out there to apply for farmers and producers across our state, and then figure out what it takes to get those applied for, hopefully successfully. We can't guarantee working with us will mean success in an application you submit, but we try to help out as much as we can and make sure that you provide the best application you can to fit your operation and hopefully provide you with opportunities to grow or expand. And then we've got a couple new positions that are we've dabbled in this a little bit at K-Card, but we've got one lady that's really dialed in on marketing. So if you ever need any marketing assistance, we don't do ads for people. We don't think of it in that respect. But if you're like, well, how can I reach my customers? Well, we'll help you think through who your customers are, first of all. And then the second piece to that is we'll help you actually, if you've got social media that you're using, if you've got a website then we're happy to look through some of those and provide some recommendations of things that might help tweak that a little bit better to reach your customer base more effectively. So that's a little bit about K-Card. I'll show it at the end as well, but there you see, we've got an office in Elizabethtown. If you show up at that office, there's not any guarantee that any of us will be there. That actually is just where the mail goes. All of us work remotely. So I'm talking to you today from Central Kentucky. We've got people all over the state, but that's an address just for the mail. That phone number that you see there, that actually goes to our administrative assistant. So she mans the phone all the time, during business hours, 8 to 5. And then feel free to leave a message if somebody doesn't answer. She'll get back to you. The safest thing is to call that number. She'll make sure if it's not me that works with you, it could be one of any of, I think there's 14 of us on staff now. So it might not be me, but if you call me directly, then it may take me a couple days to get back with you. If you call Laura at that phone number there, then she's usually always Johnny on the spot, and we'll get back to you much quicker than I typically will. Just because there's so many different things and I'm going so many different ways. And then that email address there, that's the general K-Card email. It'll be the same lady, Laura, will be the one who responds to you from that email address also. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about what K-Card is in a nutshell, I want to talk to you. What I've got in mind tonight is to really break down from the federal level down to the state level, and then any local programs that might suit you all within your farming operations. So we're going to start off at the federal level, really talk about the biggest player that there is, which is the United States Department of Agriculture. So if you ever are looking for one, the best way to look is they have a USDA Service Center locator. I say service center because underneath the service center could be one of 3 agencies. And stick with me for a minute, because just because there's a service center doesn't mean that all 3 agencies, or even any of the 3 agencies, might be in your particular county. I say that because where I'm at in Boyle County, we have a state level conservation office, which would fall under NRCS, which I'll talk about here in a second. But we do not have an FSA or a rural development office here in our town. So if I need any of these 3 services, I have to go to an adjoining county to be able to find them, unless it's something specific to Boyle County or specific to really, or just Boyle County, period. That's where our office handles. Beyond that, I've got to go surrounding areas. So if you're ever looking for where your local office is, I just encourage you, there's a map, and I can pull it up here if we have time at the end and show you how to use that locator tool. But you click on the state. Once you find the USDA Service Center locator, click on your state, Kentucky, and then usually they split it up down the middle. So if you draw a line from like up at the tip of Covington, straight down through that portion of the state to the south, they split it up east-west. So like Boyle County is right on the line. We're on the eastern side of that line. And then there's others that, if we were any closer, we'd be on the western side. But you just click on your county. Once you get, pick the east side, west side, it'll pull up a little bit bigger picture so you can see county level. Click on your county, and then it'll tell you which location might have one of these 3 offices in it. So I'll start off with the Farm Service Agency. What that is, FSA office, if you've ever heard people talk about that, that is going to be primarily 2 different things that you'll get from the FSA office. One, if you've ever looked for a farm serial number, a lot of the grants that we'll kind of reference a little bit today through the conversation, almost all of them will require some farm serial number, is what it's called, FSN. That is something that you'll find at FSA. So if you have not ever received one of those, we get this situation a lot where, maybe you bought a farm that was split off from a bigger farm, or maybe you own a piece of land that it might have been 5, 15, 30 acres or bigger, but it's never been registered with the Farm Service Agency before. They don't know it exists. So what in that case, if there's no record, of your farm and no serial number tied to it, you'll have to bring in a copy of the deed for that piece of property. Give them the deed so that they know the physical description of where the property is, where its boundary is. And then from that, they'll issue you a farm serial number. Now, I will say that it depends on each office how quickly that they'll respond to that request being made. But there's a lot of things that have been put on USDA's plate over the last couple of administrations. So they've got a little bit of a backlog. So don't be surprised if it takes, 6-8 weeks sometimes to get that back. I'll use a personal example for that. The home farm that we have, we bought it in its entirety. So there was already a serial number assigned to that. It was a very early assignment, and it hasn't changed. It hadn't changed hands for, like 80 years when we bought it. So they already had a number set up. It was already a functioning farm. So that was no problem. They just changed the owner from the previous owner to my name. A couple years ago, we bought another piece of land that was split off from a much bigger farm. The people who bought it before us split it off. We just acquired it from them. So there was a new farm number issued for the new owner. But then when we bought it, it was just subdivided just a little bit. The owner kept just a tiny piece of it for a home that they had on there. We bought the rest. So we ended up getting a new number. Well, we submitted the deed, just like I said. It actually took us about 3 months. So 12 weeks to get a number back from them. But, don't be surprised. I just say that to say, don't expect it to be a quick turnaround necessarily. It may be, which is great, or it may not be. I just don't want you to be stuck with a grant application that needs a number and you can't get one. So I just encourage you to look for that sooner than later if that's something you're thinking about, especially after our conversation today. The other thing that the Farm Service Agency is going to do is they're going to be there to report any crops. So there are government programs for pasture. There's government programs for cattle. Any kind of livestock. There's government programs could be there for crop insurance. If you ever have crop insurance, whether it's for growing commodities, corn, wheat, soybeans, or if it's even produce. If there's any produce farmers on the call, there is insurance that's available to you as a produce farmer through the FSA office. You would have to file a report saying that you planted tomatoes, pumpkins, squash, whatever it might be in your produce field. You would have to file a report with them saying that that was planted to be able to get that insurance. Of course, you would do that after you sign up. The sign up period, I think the deadline is March 15th. So it's coming up for most spring planted crops. Deadline is March 15th to enroll in crop insurance. It would be a NAP, N-A-P, which is non-insured ag production, I think is what NAP stands for. Don't hold me to that. But if you go into your office because you want to grow produce and you'd like to get insurance on it, NAP insurance, NAP is what you would ask for. Again, sign up for that on by March 15th. But you would have to sign up for that at the FSA office and then file that crop report through them as well. The last thing that I'll mention about Farm Service Agency is some offices, not all, but some offices will have a lending opportunity for you. So a lot of times FSA is considered a lender of last resort. USDA does the names that they give and the nomenclature that they use for assigning different reasons and policies within their jurisdiction. I don't like them, because lender of last resort doesn't sound like it's not a very positive thing to assess to anyone. But basically what that means is that you have tried for a loan with a commercial lender, with a bank, with an ag lending institution, and been rejected. And then if that's the case, they can help with some really good lending programs. They can help you buy land. They can help you buy livestock. They can help you buy equipment, storage facilities, whether it be for grain, cold storage for produce. All that is fair game for their programs. Not all those that I just mentioned, especially the loans for like grain storage, cold storage, you don't have to meet that requirement to use that program. But if you're, buying land, buying livestock, needing an operating loan to operate your farm for a year, get through those lean times that you may have, that's something that you can apply through FSA and receive as well. I will say, I know we're recording, but I will say that there is a little gray area there on that lender of last resort. So if you have any interest at all, it's a great tool for beginning farmers. It's a great tool for veteran farmers to utilize their services for lending. I mean, I'll be honest, that's how I started my farming operation. I started from scratch whenever I started farming. I grew up on a small farm, but there wasn't a place for me there, and that's totally fine. No problem at all. I knew that going into my operation. So I ended up using FSA to get my first line of credit to plant my first corn crop and soybean crop. And that's how I got started. So it's a great tool, great lending rates, great terms to repay those loans. So if that's ever of interest, any of those things are ever interest to any of you all on this call, I'd encourage you to find out where your local FSA office is and stop by there. I want to switch gears a little bit. So FSA is kind of the first one. And for the next two that I want to talk about, you'll have to have been to the FSA office first. But after you got that farm serial number, there's a thing called NRCS, which stands for Natural Resource Conservation Service. They have some really, really good programs that cover a lot of different aspects of agriculture. I know in Eastern Kentucky, if you're looking at produce, any livestock, there's options for NRCS within your world. Also forestry, that falls under the jurisdiction of NRCS programs as well. So all three of those are fair game for that. One thing that I want to make sure you know about with NRCS is one of the biggest programs for developing conservation stewardship across our nation that NRCS does is a program called EQIP, IQIP. And I think that is Environmental Quality Incentive Program. I always get confused on what the I is, but EQIP, nonetheless, IQIP. That program does a lot of different things. We get calls a lot from farmers asking, how can I pay for fencing? Well, EQIP is one of those opportunities that you can use, one of the tools in the toolbox. One thing that I will say, EQIP will not pay for perimeter fences. So if you're looking for fencing to, separate your livestock from a road or, the boundary line of your property to the boundary line of a neighbor to keep livestock from crossing over, that's not the kind of program that EQIP will provide for. But if you're looking for fencing solutions to create internal fencing, maybe you want to do rotational grazing, you want to fence some cattle out of a hayfield, but then maybe rotational graze that hayfield after you cut it in the spring. All that is fair game for what EQIP will cover for fencing. So it'll cover all that interior fencing. It'll also help if you're doing rotational grazing specifically. It'll help you by putting in waters or different water sources for those different paddocks that you create. If you create 4 different pastures with interior fences and you need a water to those livestock in those 4 fields, then it'll put waters. Usually like if you did 4 and it was a square, you could put 1 water in the middle and have the cattle go to that one central location. If your farm's not laid out in a square or a rectangle and it's got to, move around in an L shape or something, usually they'll put 1 water to water 2 pastures. So there'd be 1 fence line water. You could get to it on either side. But that's the biggest programs that's for EQIP on the livestock side. They also have EQIP programs if you're raising crops, corn, wheat, soybeans, produce, and you need cover crops. They've got cover crops. They've got riparian buffers, to basically give a field of grass or a grass strip between, say, a crop field of any sort and, woodlands or crop field and rivers and streams or waterways. Those are all programs that would fall under that jurisdiction. The other thing that they also can do is high tunnels. So if you're a vegetable producer and you're looking to extend your season, be able to plant crops earlier or have crops grow later into the growing season, high tunnel season extension is another option under EQIP. And the way all these programs work that's under EQIP, just keep in mind that you have to apply first and you have to receive notice of award. So they have to tell you that your project has been funded, and you have to sign a contract with the NRCS agent you work with saying that I will follow X, Y, and Z and receive, Y dollars worth of payment from those things that I follow and implement. So you'll have everything spelled out when you apply. This is what I want to do. These are the practices I want to implement. The whole goal of all this is to make the environment better from the things that you do. So I'm implementing these to improve the environment, and then it will reimburse you for those expenses. It'll spell out exactly how many dollars you're going to get. It'll tell you what you have to do. There'll be specifications of what they expect the project to look like when it's done. And all that'll be spelled out whenever you sign a contract saying you're willing to enter into this program. Their reimbursement process is based off of, like, if you're building a fence, it's so many dollars a foot that they'll reimburse you. If you spend more money than that to put the fence up, then that comes out of your pocket. You're not made whole by this program necessarily. But if you can put a fence up for less money than what they say it costs, if you do the labor yourself instead of hiring it out, then you might potentially make a little bit of money from implementing that practice on your farm. I also mentioned woodlands. They do have like timber stand improvement programs that I'm pretty sure are part of EQIP. They can also help eradicate invasive species. If you would have a forester come out, survey your timber, and say that there's bush honeysuckle or invasive tree species that serve no purpose and actually cause problems to a good forest stand, then they can help pay to eradicate those species, with the goal being that you have a better stand of timber after the program is implemented. And then they'll check back with you frequently, not frequently, but periodically, I should say, just to see how the project's going. Because some of those things like timber, that's a long-term goal potentially, unless you've got timber that's ready to harvest pretty quickly. With pasture, those pasture programs, the waters, high tunnel implementations, you're looking at a 5-year contract that you would enter into for those. So just keep that in mind. If you sign up for something, you're saying that I'm going to follow these practices for a minimum of 5 years in most cases, before that's something that's you're willing to change. So you got to commit to it for that length of time in most cases. The last one that's on here, I know I've covered a lot. I'll mention the R&D, rural development, and then I'll hit pause for a minute, see if there's any questions. But the rural development program, that's not going to be in every county. Those are usually regional offices. So it might be like, for me, I live in Boyle. I go to NRCS in Mercer. I go to FSA. If I go to FSA for crop reporting, I go to Mercer. If I need FSA for any kind of loan conversation, I go to Lincoln. And then if I need to go to a rural development office, then I have to go to Shelby County. So like I said, you might go, and Shelby County is about an hour away from me. So that's why I say most rural development offices are regional in nature. But rural development is going to be more for like that RCDG grant that I mentioned that KCART applies for and receive. They're the entity that manages that. Another thing that they do, probably about the only thing they do that is farmer facing, is going to be a program called the Value Added Producer Grant. I'll talk about that a little bit later. That's one where it's actually open right now, but I'll go ahead and talk about it now just briefly. I would encourage you all, if you all are doing anything that adds value, so maybe you have livestock, you're taking any kind of animal, beef, pork, lamb, small ruminants, and you're turning those into cuts of meat. That's a value added practice. If you're raising tomatoes and you're turning those tomatoes into canned goods, tomato sauce, canned tomatoes, that kind of thing, and selling those products, you have to be selling all this that I'm going to talk about, then that's a value added product. The last example that I'd mention would be if you are raising produce or eggs. It doesn't have to be something where you slaughter the animal and sell the meat. If you're raising eggs and you're selling them locally, so your customer base is local, USDA defines local within 400 miles of your home address. So it's a pretty big net. But if you're selling local produce, then that also is direct to consumer. That's the key. Local direct to consumer produce. Then value added producer grant might also be for you. The goal of this program through the Rural Development Office is to help you expand your business in a quicker way than you would on your own dime. So it's going to pay for two things. It's going to pay for marketing expenses, and it's going to pay for any kind of processing or packaging associated with the expansion. What do I mean by that? If you're already doing, let's say, 3 beef a year that you're raising to slaughter, having them slaughtered and selling that beef, 3 beef a year, and you want to go to selling 25 beef a year, then that difference, so 22 animals worth of expenses, processing, packaging, marketing, that is what is an eligible expense. Okay. You have to be raising whatever it is and selling whatever it is that you're doing for a minimum of 2 years. So going into your 3rd year before you can apply, and you have to have growth in mind. So I'll just leave it at that for the value added producer grant. If that's something you're interested in, I'd encourage you to reach out to K-Card. We do a lot of work with that grant, helping people apply to it, helping people, if they receive the grant, we also can help with the record keeping that goes into filing reimbursements for that program. So it's no money is free money. I will say that. In very few cases does that differ, but this is one where it's a really great program, but there is some work that you have to do to apply and to manage the grant after you receive it. So before I move away from federal agencies, does anybody have any questions about what we've covered so far?
Yeah, you mentioned put a farm number, like a acreage minimum. Is that number of acres that you're utilizing for farm work, or just the size of the property?
So that would be the size of the property.
Okay.
And just to be clear, there is no, to my understanding, there is no acreage minimum to get a farm serial number. But you would have to report all the acres. Like they would want the whole deed so that they can make the outline of the property. Now, what they'll probably do is designate which acres are usable acres and which acres, may just be growing timber or something like that. But yeah, there is no, because we've got producers in, Jefferson County, which is Louisville. We've got producers in Fayette County that live in city limits that are, they might have a half-acre produce garden that they're intensively managing and selling produce out of, but they've gotten the farm serial number on that property. So, but yeah, good question, Richard. Anything else anybody has? Okay. Well, I want to move on to state agencies. If you all have any questions about what we just talked about, feel free to let me know. But I'm going to move on to state agencies. So I'm going to cover just a little bit about KDA. I'm just really going to say that it's here. There's a few programs that I want to bring up and I've got extra slides for that I want to make sure and talk about with you all directly. The 2 things that you see listed under KDA, I do want to mention those briefly while we're on this slide. So there's 2 organizations that fall under KDA's jurisdiction. One is the Kentucky Ag Development Board. One is the Kentucky Ag Finance Corporation. Kentucky Ag Development Board is kind of the grand poobah. Okay, they're the ones that they can provide grant funding to farms for eligible projects. Excuse me. You can also go to them with an application, and they can refer your application to Kentucky Ag Finance and make suggestions about what those interest rates and terms might be for a project you apply for. So if you've got anything, the key thing with Kentucky Ag Development Board, I'm going to back up just a second and give you a brief history on them. They were founded just briefly right before K-Card started. Right after the tobacco buyout and the master settlement agreement, which was 2002 timeframe, was when Kentucky Ag Development Board was founded. Its mission was to diversify Kentucky producers away from its reliance on burley production, burley tobacco. So whenever it started, there's been a lot of iterations of how they function, but they basically get that master settlement agreement that I mentioned. They get half of the purse that comes in from that agreement. That agreement was made between each state that filed a lawsuit with the tobacco companies. The lawsuit was filed because people believed that tobacco companies did not properly explain the risks of smoking and tobacco use to its consumers. So that master settlement agreement basically depends, the funds that come into that pool every year is a percentage of the smokers that smoke in each state. So that money comes into Kentucky from those involved tobacco companies. It is split in half off the bat. Half of it goes to the General Assembly. Half of it goes to this Kentucky Ag Development Board. With that money, Kentucky Ag Development Board is able to fund projects in the form of grants or low interest loans, with the goal being to diversify farms from tobacco. So I know that there's not a lot of tobacco left in our state. If you look at where we were in 2000 compared to where we are today in 2025, that number is going to be drastically different. But there's still, they still see that as a need and a way to help producers in our state. So that's what they're here for, and kind of how they evolved into where they are today. What projects work with them? So if you have a project that you would like to get funding for, the biggest projects are going to be anything that helps other Kentucky producers other than yourself. You can have a financial gain that's benefited from a project that you apply for, but you need to show and explain how in your application that's going to benefit other producers beyond your own farm. A lot of those things, think about like on-farm stores that sell products the farm itself raises, plus also bring in farm products from surrounding areas. Grain elevators, central and eastern Kentucky specifically for the most part, but grain elevators also fall under that category because they're bringing in grain from usually a larger area, commingling that grain and help farmers hopefully receive a premium for the crops that they raise. That's just a quick example of what you're going to get funding for at Ag Development Board. If you have any questions about that one, any ideas for projects, again, feel free to reach out to KCARD. We can kind of help. And that, some of our funding comes from them, from that board. We don't have a seat on the board, so we don't have a vote in whether the project's funded or not. But we can help you put together an application that has its best opportunity to get funded. Not saying that it will, but we at least present them the information that they want to look at to make their decision. The other piece to that puzzle that I'm going to mention under KDA is the Kentucky Ag Finance Corporation. So that's like the younger brother to the Kentucky Ag Development Board. What KAFC does is, you apply to those programs usually in conjunction with another lender. So that lender might be a local bank. It might be Ag Credit, Farm Credit, Mid-America, someplace that speaks ag. And you make that application to them. That lender helps submit an application on your behalf to the Kentucky Ag Finance Corporation. And then usually the deal with that is you get a lower interest than you would from a commercial lender for that portion that Ag Finance underwrites. So let's say in the case of land, if you wanted to buy a farm, their max lending is $500,000. They will give you $250,000 of lower interest money to join in with the other 250 from another bank. So that's kind of what it does. That interest rate for most of their programs is going to be 2.75%, and they'll give you a lending rate. They'll give you that rate for up to 15 years for a payback period. That's for land purchase. Now they have ag diversification programs. They have ag entrepreneurship programs that are also funded under that pool of money that Ag Finance gets each year. But make an application there, and that's really where the process starts. So that's two programs that I want to mention there. The other two is the other thing that I want to just mention briefly is cooperative extension. How many of y'all, anybody ever, I've heard some of y'all mention, I think it was Natalie mentioned early on that one of her family goes to the extension office a lot. That's something that's there for you anytime you need anything. Extension is going to be primarily for production help. So if you've got issues with growing produce, maybe your tomatoes start to look bad. Trying to think of what else. Fruit trees. If you got fruit trees on your property that are showing signs of disease or not doing well, that's what extension's for. Same thing with livestock. If you've got livestock that are doing well, you're trying to figure out how to reseed a pasture. Any of those would be fair game questions for cooperative extension. The last one that I'll mention, so there's actually two things. There's cooperative extension through the University of Kentucky. UK is the land grant university in our state. The first one, there's two. The second land grant came in with Kentucky State University, and it's the same resources are available. It just might be a little bit different look. A lot of times KSU is going to help you more with smaller farm questions. UK is going to be some small farm questions, but then also getting into more of the commodity ag products. So either way, use their resources. They're available to you free of charge. Just figure out where your cooperative extension agent is. There's an office in all 120 counties in our state. So they may not be very far away. It's just a matter of figuring out where they are in relation to you. I want to mention a couple of the grants that are available to you from the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. The first one that I want to make sure and mention is underneath a program called the Kentucky Proud Marketing System. Those three logos that you see on this slide are all three marketing opportunities that you can help to distinguish your farm from other producers. The first one, or kind of the parent, is going to be that logo that's got the cardinal and then says Kentucky Proud. So if you've ever heard of Kentucky Proud, you can get a Kentucky Proud producer number or an identifier. Once you have that identification that says you are a Kentucky Proud producer, then you can put that logo on your marketing materials, on your bags, social media, on your booth at a farmer's market. All that's fair game to use that logo for. The next two depend on a little bit, they need a little more information from you to figure out which one might apply to you. So Homegrown by Heroes, if any of you all on this call are either active duty or veterans from our military service, first of all, I want to say thank you for what you've done in defending our country. The second thing is that there is a Homegrown by Heroes program for you to say that you are a veteran, you are a farmer, and that the products you're selling are products that you have raised or processed for sale on your own. So it's a step above from Kentucky Proud. The only thing that you'll need from that is to show that you were honorably discharged from the military. You'll have to have that number. I used to remember what it is. I don't right now, but you'll have to provide them that discharge number. Once you provide them that and they verify that, then you can use that marketing material as well to your benefit. The last one is a pretty recent one. It's not been around for very long, but Appalachia Proud. So for most of y'all on this call, anybody that's in one of the Appalachian County regions of Kentucky, in Eastern Kentucky or Southern Kentucky, this is a marketing program that's available to you. And it's basically just saying that you are Kentucky Proud and you raised your products in the mountains of Kentucky. And so that's your additional piece. So you can do all three if you're a veteran or active duty and you raised in Appalachia, then technically you could have all three of those at your disposal to use. So I just want to make sure that you know those programs exist. Any questions on those before I move on? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next one here, which is a grant opportunity that they have. So probably one of the biggest things here really all of these, the top four are what we get a lot of interest in. Really the top three. I don't know as much about the bottom two as I do the others, but with the first one, the promotional grant, its acronym for that one is the POP grant. So if you are looking for ways to market your farm and the products that you offer to your customers, that's how you do it. Think of it as it's defined now as 10% of the farm impact. So they don't need to know your numbers. They don't need to know how much product you're selling or what you're doing, but they do need to know how much of that product will be sold, how much you expect to sell under your farm name, and are you working with other producers to do it? So if you're selling up to $80,000 worth of product or $80,000 worth of farm impact is what you assess this grant can help you do, then that means you can apply for the maximum of $8,000 or 10% of 80,000. Anything under that number is fair game. So you don't have to be a large farm to be able to apply to this grant. It's just that's the maximum value that you can apply for. But think about things with that as logoed materials is something you can't sell it. Okay, so you can't buy farm swag and then sell that as a revenue stream for your farm. But if you want to have hats, attire, bags, flyers that explain what your farm is and what you're about, all those things can be used with the funds from this grant. The other thing that it can also do is help promote your grant through social media. So if you want to if you want to do paid advertisements on social media for your farm, that's something that you can budget for. If you want to develop a website or update a website for your farm, that's something that you can do with these funds as well. So you've got to submit a budget. You got to say, this is how much X, Y, and Z is going to cost for me to implement. You provide that budget to KDA. They review your application. They're kind of a revolving application period that's reviewed. I think it's every 2 or 3 months that they review the application submitted. But they'll get back to you with questions and then let you know if you're funded or not. From there, you spend the money up front out of your own pocket. Then you submit receipts for those expenses in the form of a reimbursement, and then they provide you the reimbursement. So it's a 50-50. It's a cost share. So if you spend $8,000, then you're actually looking at a $16,000 project. Okay. If you spend $1,000, then you could get $500 back. Another way of looking at that. So that's what the POP grant is. Farm to Fork. If you all have ever heard of like farm to fork events where you're trying to connect your community to your farm or other farms in your area, a lot of times they'll have like a chef come in and cook food that's all farm raised within the area, within the county. Even your own farm would be fair, but you're help promoting that event and buying the products with a maximum of $750. So you'd spend a $1,500 meal just for food or promotion, and then get $750 back. The last one that I'll mention is buy local. So if you are a farmer who is trying to, maybe you're expanding a little bit and you can't sell everything that you raise at a farmer's market, maybe you want to start looking at selling to restaurants. A lot of times those restaurants can buy food off of a food truck from Sysco or GFS much cheaper than a farmer can sell something that's raised right there in the county that the restaurant's located in. Well, this buy local program is there to help kind of bridge that gap. It's not going to make it go away, but say that they could buy a pound of tomatoes for $1 from a food truck, and you might sell a pound of tomatoes for $2. Well, the goal is to kind of help bridge the gap to where the farm has an incentive to sell to the restaurant, because the restaurant can get a $2 product for maybe $1.50 instead of buying, a tomato that came from Florida or California from a food truck for $1. So that's what that is. You've got to have pretty good records for that one. Again, the restaurant applies for this one. That's not something the farmer does, but just something to keep in your back pocket if you ever approach restaurants and say, "Hey, I'd love to sell product to you." If their response is, "Well, I can't afford to pay for your product," then here's an opportunity to kind of maybe make that happen for you. So those are the grant opportunities from KDA. Now, I've already talked about Ag Development Board. I'm not going to get into much detail more on this one. The one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is CAPE. So that second one down, County Ag Investment Program. That's another acronym. It stands for CAPE. If you have, so most counties now, I think all counties in Kentucky now have money that their County Ag Development Board receives. So I mentioned the Kentucky, the State Ag Development Board, each county has its own board as well. So each county receives a portion of that Master Settlement Agreement funds. With those funds the county receives, they can elect to have a County Ag Investment Program, or CAPE. What CAPE does, so I mentioned EQIP earlier, okay? EQIP is going to do all the fencing internally on your farm. CAPE is one of the, it's right now, it's the only program I can think of where it will pay for the perimeter fencing of your property. Maybe not all of it. Okay, so I live in Boyle. Here, you can apply for a project that costs $4,000. You'll spend all that money up front, and then they'll reimburse you half of it. So you spend 4, get 2,000 back. I think the maximum is spend 10, get 5,000 back. Okay, but each county is different. They can give you no more than $5,000 for a $10,000 project, but you might spend 6 and get 3, or you might spend 2,000 and get 1,000 back. It just depends what the let's see, the persuasion of your local ag development board is as to how they set up the program for your county. But like I said, it's going to do those things like exterior fencing. If you have livestock, small ruminants specifically, and cattle, you can buy breeding stock through that program. It can help pay for some farm equipment implements. It won't buy tractors, but it can help pay for some implements you might need to help make a job easier on the farm. Trying to think of other things that it will do. There's an ag diversification portion of that one. So if you have been a produce farmer and you want to diversify into, let's see, what's an example? You want to diversify into something where you need to keep your products cool on your farm, all right? Then, and you need cold storage. So it can help pay for cold storage on your farm. Freezers, if you're doing any kind of proteins that need to be frozen, you know, beef, pork, poultry. If you're looking for a CoolBot, if anybody's ever heard of those before, you know, that's a really inexpensive way to make a larger room like a walk-in cooler. So you can keep produce cold, all the way down to like 32 degrees, well, 34 degrees. And you're using basically an air conditioning unit with a special CoolBot program box that plugs into that air conditioner to keep that room at a certain temperature, much cooler than you would your home. So that's a really good program that's really easy to apply to. Every county has a different sign-up period. Like Bull County, it just depends. Usually the county will find out what money it gets around April, and then it's up to the county as to when they implement that CAPE program for their locality. But I would start with your, I mentioned extension a minute ago. I would start with your extension agent in your county to ask them how you apply. They should be able to tell you, and then kind of take it from there.
I will just say on the CAPE grant for Martin County, we did just finish the application period for here, but that's a good time for everyone to be thinking about it for next year and getting ready. That's another one where you're going to need like your farm number and one other number, I can't remember what it was, and your water quality plan. But Martin County does the maximum with the 5,000 amount. And
oh, nice. Well, that's great. Okay, that's awesome.
And there are very few applicants for it in Martin County, so it is unlikely that will change for next year. And
okay,
the current contact person for that is Vicki Evans. And so if anyone wants that contact information, happy to pass that along after this call.
Awesome. Excuse me. Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, it's like I said, I never know what county is doing what, so I never want to say, but that's really awesome if you all have the opportunity to spend 10, get 5 back. That's a great deal. So keep that in mind if you all have any interest. So like Richard said, you will need that farm serial number. I think the other one that they require now is your ag exemption number. So it'd be an AE number with like, how many numbers is it? I think it's 9. Yeah, I think it's 9 AE and then 9 digits, 9 numbers. You have to apply for that through the, oh goodness, I'm drawing a blank. I think it's through the economic department that you apply to that number. But anyway, that's for another conversation. But those 2 numbers, it's a pretty easy application too. It's about, in our county, it's about 3 pages long, just on the front side. It just wants to know what you're using the money for. If you've ever been, you've got to attend some kind of educational event. Most of those are going to be through your county extension office. Once the ag agent submits to Ag Development Board that requirement has been met and you've spent the project funds, you've submitted your receipts, you got to provide clear checks. You can't buy anything with cash with that program anymore. So you got to either show a credit card statement where you paid the credit card, or you've got to show a cleared, canceled check, or a cleared check. You show one of those 2 things along with your receipts, and then that's when you get reimbursed. The only other one that I'm going to mention off this list, Ag Development Fund, so KADF projects, that's what I mentioned a second ago on the other slide. I won't rehash that. The last one there, on-farm water. That is a program. It has morphed some since it started. It's a relatively new program from the Ag Development Board. If you have any interest in using your own water, so by that, what I'm going to mean is you're capturing water from a pond and using it to irrigate produce. You're capturing water off of a roof into a tank and using that to water livestock or irrigate a high tunnel. Those are uses of on-farm water, of the on-farm water program. The new person who's in charge of that, so it's under Ag Development Board, but they have assigned that program to the Kentucky Hort Council. So if you ever have any interest in that, look up Kentucky Horticulture Council, and you'll find information on their website for that program, for those things that I just mentioned. Oh, sorry. Hold on. There we go. All right. So I've already mentioned a lot of what Kentucky Ag Finance Corporation is. Forgot I had that slide in there. I won't rehash this. The only thing that I want to mention, I mentioned some programs earlier. I do want to rehash those. So beginning farmer program, that's going to be for buying land, buying farmland. So if the land has a home on it, that's usually what they say the other lender that you work with is covering. The land is all that they're interested in financing for folks. No homes, barns and farm dwellings, that's fine, but just no home. Like I said, that program is 2.75% interest for up to 15 years with a maximum of their involvement would be $250,000. So a $500,000 piece of property is the max that you could buy with this program. The other thing is the one of the caveats, you have to have certain net worth. There's a net worth cap. So if you're said to be worth more than X, I don't remember what that number is, then the program may not apply to you. And then if you have been a farmland owner for more than 10 years, then you can't use this program. So if you bought a farm and then 10 years down the road, you found another piece of property to buy, if you had paid off or paid down that loan, you could reapply for another opportunity. Once you get to 11 years of owning land, that program can't help you anymore. Ag infrastructure, a lot of people use those for like chicken barns, tobacco barns, some, but a lot of that's like chicken barns, dairy barns, confinement barns for livestock. That's what a lot of that ag infrastructure is for. Grain bins is another use for that. That's good uses for that money. Again, that'll be 2.75%. I think that one's not as long though. Maybe 10 years is what that one goes out to for a payback period. The last one is that diversification and through entrepreneurship in ag. So that diversification piece covers a lot of things. But like I said, if you're switching from, a more commodity-based ag production to maybe a direct-to-consumer model and need cooling space, need specialized equipment to be able to do those things, that's what that money is for under that specific category. Okay, so one of the things that I want to mention next here, we already talked a little bit about this with your cooperative extension service. I mentioned the county ag agent. So there's actually going to be more than just an ag agent in each office. So I mentioned every county in Kentucky has an extension office. There's usually going to be one of 4 agents there. They may not all be there, but you might find an ag agent. So it's an ag and natural resource agent, ANR. You might find a 4-H, which is, the 4-H program. You might find a, oh my goodness, I just blanked on what it's actually called. Basically like home economics. If you had a home ec in school, it's the agent, family and consumer science agent. That's what it is. Family and consumer science services. That agent is there, and then some counties, not all, have a horticulture agent. So usually the ANR agent, the ag agent, would focus on the crop side, the cattle side, livestock sectors. Horticulture would be more for produce and like lawn care, ornamental trees, and fruit trees is what those would be for. One of the last programs that I want to mention here, and this will be about it for the acronyms that we'll cover tonight, is Kentucky State University has a program that's called the Small Scale Farm Grant Program. If you have anything that helps your farm diversify, by diversify, that's probably not the best term. If you're doing the easiest way, there's one of 2 ways. If you're in an area that's designated as food insecure, that's option 1. Or if you are in an area that is not an area, but if you yourself are a value-added producer, so you're, like I mentioned before, you're turning livestock into meat, or you're selling local produce under your own label, the Small Scale Farm Grant is an excellent program to meet your needs for expansion. If you need pieces of equipment, this will buy it. Again, it will not buy tractors. It will not buy anything with a motor. Okay, so tillers, walk behind tractors, any of that, that's off the table. But some of the examples that we use for this program, if you are looking for, again, refrigeration space on your farm, so a walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer, or reach-in freezer or cooler, you can apply for up to $5,000 through this grant. There is no cost share. So if it costs you $5,000 to buy a walk-in cooler or a CoolBot, and that builds one to fit your operations needs, then you have no money out of pocket. The other cool thing about this program is that you don't have to wait for them to reimburse you. If you apply for this, get funded, then they will send you a check for whatever you asked for in your budget, up to $5,000. Then you take that money and go spend it to buy what you said you were going to, and submit them receipts and a canceled check after the fact. So you don't have to take money out of your own operations needs to be able to function within this program. Another thing that it's done, I've talked a lot about, produce, livestock, that kind of thing. If any of you all have any interest in maple production, making maple syrup or other maple products from the syrup that you collect, or from the sap you collect, turn into syrup on your farm. This Small Scale Farm Grant has built several sugar shacks for producers across our state. So that's another option that you can look at from KSU from that program. I'm trying to think of anything else. Delivery trailers. So people have bought like enclosed trailers and put wraps on them with your farm logo and farm information, and then use those trailers to go set up at farmers markets each Saturday. That's also an eligible expense for KSU small scale farm grant. I know I'm leaving some stuff out, but if you have any questions about this program, it's a great one. It's a really easy application, about 2 pages. You can have this thing knocked out in less than an hour, easy. KCARD can review it for you before you submit it, and then hopefully, you find out whether you get funded or not. It is a rolling application as well. That one, I don't remember. I'm off on my months. Usually it starts in February of each year. So like the first of the month, whatever month it's due. So if it's February 1st, get it in by February 1st at midnight. 2 months later in April will be the next application, and it just revolves every 2 months. So they take the applications in, score them, let you know if you're funded or not. So it's we've got about 14 minutes left of our time together tonight. I've got a couple slides just about some record keeping stuff that really goes well with these grants, some of them. But I'll hit pause for a second if anybody has any questions. Or if you've got an idea for a project and want to know if one of these grants might fit, then shout that out too, and we'll talk about that.
This isn't an idea for a project, but I did get the KSU grant.
Okay.
And I got it for something that was kind of odd. So, and I'm just saying it, you can kind of come up with your own ideas sometimes.
Yep.
I wanted to build 2 giant cages as big as a high tunnel. So the frame sort of like a high tunnel frame, but covered in chicken wire, and plant berry plants inside those so that the deer and the birds couldn't reach my berries.
Gotcha.
And it paid for that.
Awesome. Okay.
So just sometimes you can kind of come up with a weird idea and give it a try.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Misty. I appreciate you saying that. One of the main contacts, and Joni, Misty, you can share if it's somebody different. I remember Joni Nelson's name is the one that's usually listed on there.
Yes, I spoke to her recently. She's still, as far as I can tell, doing that.
Okay, good. So Joni's one. I think there's 2 others that they list on the application. I can't remember them, but if you've got questions for projects like that, like Misty mentioned, feel free to reach out to them and get their opinion on if it's applicable use for the money or not. They're happy to do that before you actually put your application in. Anything else?
Maybe this is something that you'd sit down with KCARD or you to go over, but do you, like I'm thinking about, like Fernanda had messaged in the chat about like just moved here and is starting a small farm, right? So is there like a 1-page or like a playbook that's basically like, so here are the best go-to lowest interest loans, or here's the small grants that are like the lowest upfront investment or something to go for first? Or is that something that like you could sit down with KCARD and be like, I want to start doing an orchard and poultry, and I have land or I don't have land, like what should I start with for applying for?
Well, so okay. I think what I would say to that question would be, first of all, if you want to reach out to us at KCARD, we can kind of help you think through what kind of money it's going to take to start up a project, whatever that project might be. If you're looking at putting in an orchard, anything related to farming, we're happy to help you think through the numbers that would go into that from the startup side. And then once, if it's an orchard, it might take 3 or 4 years before that is bearing fruit to sell. But we'll help you think through the expenses to get through that, startup to 3-year time frame, and then what it would take once you are up and going and have product to sell, what that would look like for you. A lot of what we do for those kind of things, we call those financial projections. we're going to use information from University of Kentucky and other land grant universities across the country, because UK doesn't always have everything that might come across our door. So we find other institutions to get that from. But regardless, we'll help you put together a starting point at least, and then figure out what your expenses are. And then a lot of times we can help you find funding sources. I mean, grants are really hard to find for startups. It seems weird. It's a little counterintuitive. I think that the USDA is looking for you to show some skin in the game before that they'll provide, grant money to be able to fund a project. That's the case with the value-added producer grant I mentioned earlier. But we can help you think through some lower interest loan opportunities that might fit you to that question. But we're going to start off with, how much money do we need to make this operation have a chance at success before we go looking for sources of funds.
Thank
you. Let's see, we just got a few minutes. So what I want to do, so I've got a couple record keeping slides here. I just want to say, all I'm going to say on this, and I'll skip through the rest, and I want to show you something on the internet, a couple that's not in my slide presentation. But the biggest thing is that you're keeping records. I just want to say that a lot of the stuff that I've mentioned tonight, I mentioned that you got to keep up with the records. You got to keep receipts. You've got to show proof of payment, not just that you got the receipt, but that check cleared the bank and then, was actually used to purchase those goods. So I just want to say that keeping records for your farm, whether it's to service a grant, whether it's to service your own needs, to the question there, Richard, that you just shared for Fernanda, if we have information on your farm in the form of records, how much money you've spent on the farm, how much money you've made on the farm in a given year, then we can help you with a lot more tailored approach than having to pull, projection materials from a land grant university for what they say it might cost to run a farm. So having records is paramount. And whether it's, that first example on the left on your screen, whether it's a written record book that you're just taking pen and paper and recording those in the right column for how much money you've spent or made. And it doesn't even have to be financial records. It could be yield records. If you're looking for crop insurance, how many pounds of tomatoes did I raise? How many dozen ears of sweet corn did I harvest off my farm? Those kind of records count too, right? So whatever it is, as long as you're keeping those records, then it's good for you. As long as it makes sense, that's the important part. So if that's paper records, great. The one in the middle there is going to be QuickBooks. A lot of people come to us and say, hey, I want QuickBooks records. But at the end of the day, it takes a little bit of a learning curve. Like I don't even use QuickBooks for my farm. So it might be an expense that doesn't necessarily fit the size or scope of your operation at that time. The last piece there, last option on the right, which you can't see any of the words, but that's a spreadsheet. So if you're ever interested in a record keeping tool electronically, but don't want to pay for QuickBooks, I've got a couple of examples that I can share with you that are templates of basically way to capture your information on your farm, whether you're a produce farm, livestock that has small ruminants, cattle, hogs, chickens, poultry. It's a record keeping tool that you can use. At the end of the day, it provides you categories that you can use to help file your taxes at the end of the year. So I just want to say that, and that's all I'll say on the record keeping side, because I do want to get to the end here and show you a couple examples of things. So I kept you in suspense long enough. So the other thing that I like to include in a picture is tractors. I'm a tractor geek. So this is my cheesy way of throwing a tractor in. If we had a little more time, we'd do a little review of things for record keeping on your farm and use that tractor picture as an example. I am going to leave this slide up here. So like I said, that is my cell phone number and my email address. You're welcome to reach out to me on those numbers or points of communication, but the quickest way to get a response from somebody is going to be from that kcard@kcard.info email address, or that 859 cell phone number that goes to our administrative assistant. And I am going to pull up, I want to show you all, I'll pull that back up here in just a second if you all didn't catch that in time. But I want to show you two things that I didn't put in my slideshow. The first one that I want to start out with, and it kind of goes, Fernanda, to your question. There are some programs that are focused specifically on Eastern Kentucky. One of those is this. So it's the SOAR, Saving Our Appalachian Region Farm Loan Program. It's administered by this organization right here, Kentucky Highlands. So if you all have ever heard of that, it's a really, really good resource if you have equipment or products, anything that you might need to buy to help make life on the farm a little easier. This is a great program. Basically what it is, right here, this is the nuts and bolts of it, okay? As far as what it does. You can get a loan for up to $7,500. It's a fixed interest rate of 1%, and there's no fees to close, which if you've done anything recently with lending, 1% is a phenomenal rate right now. The first year, you only make an interest-only payment, and then you have 5 years to pay the loan back in its entirety at 1% interest. So it's a great program, and it's related, it's applicable to fruit vegetable growers, beekeepers, gardeners, all that's eligible. And there's more to it than that. I just want to mention that during our time together. I'll drop this link here in the chat. This will take you straight to it. If you want to check that out yourself or mark that as a favorite. Here is a list. If you scroll down to the bottom of that link, when you open it up, here is a list of all the areas. There's 54 counties in the SOAR region. Those 54 counties are eligible for this program. And then the last thing that I want to mention is just a plug for an event that's coming up. It's Community Farm Alliance. They're one of the hosts. They work with KCARD and a couple other partners to put on what's called the Eastern Kentucky Farmer Conference. So if you all have ever been to that, this year, I think it's going to be, I can't remember if this year is in London or Corbin.
London.
This
one's in London. I'll see you there.
Okay, good deal. So make sure and check that out. It's the last Friday and Saturday of February. So I've got to pull my calendar up here. Well, so that is going to be, sorry, I told you wrong. It's the last Friday and Saturday. So it's the 21st and 22nd, I think it is. Let's make sure that's right. I should have checked that out before we started talking about it. Whoever joined on there and said that, yep, 21st and 22nd in London. The agenda's there. I'll scroll through it real slow here. Yeah, you can actually see it all in there. So the agenda's already been made. I'll be there leading a session talking about farm labor. It's a panel that we'll be presenting, but there's a lot of really good information here. The other good thing is there's some good food. So a lot of good meals. It's all locally sourced food. So if you've got the availability to come, we'd be glad to have you. And with that, I think I'm about out of time, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any questions anybody might have on what we've talked about tonight.
I'm not sure, by the way, if this is the SOAR loan. I think it is. The Mountain Association, which is another like nonprofit group that helps with kind of business planning and entrepreneurship, and they do some of the like solar and energy infrastructure stuff. I believe if it's not that 75, loan. It's another one that's a 1% loan, but it's a rotating line of credit. So you can continually like get access to more credit as you pay it off too. It's not like capped at the 7,500, I believe, unless it could be a different one. But Mountain Association was discussing an opportunity for 1% interest loan that's rotating like that as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, that's um I did not mention Mountain Association, but yeah, if you've got anything that they're a partner of ours, I guess you would say, Mountain Association is, but they've got some really good programs there too. So I don't know those. I can't speak to those very well, but I do know that Richard, what you mentioned is there, but I don't know beyond that what all they can do. But it's another good place to source info from.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Spencer, and thank you, Richard, for organizing this. I learned a lot, and there's a lot of great stuff out there. So really excited to be able to share this with everybody who joined us in December at the workshops we coordinated there, and anybody else we get in touch with. So appreciative of your time tonight, and thank you everybody who joined us tonight. I will send out the recording if you want to send me your email. If I don't have it, please send me an email so I can get yours. It's mary@regenerativefarms.org, and I'll send you a link to the meeting recording as well as notes so you can have those for your files to look back at later on.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Spencer. This was fantastic, and it's a really, really awesome reminder that there are so many resources out there for those in agriculture, and the hard part is navigating all of the different possible opportunities. There's no shortage of them. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in our state. I think a lot of it from foresight of people 20 plus years ago with Ag Development Board money. But you know if you go to any other county or any other state, even neighboring states, with the exception of Tennessee, very few have the resources that Kentucky producers do. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to make sure you know how to get a hold of the resources at your disposal.
And everybody, stay tuned for the next workshop. We'll be following up with everybody as well. If anyone wants to drop, if you weren't pre-registered for the event and want to drop an email in the chat, then we will make sure to include that. And thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Very nice, gentlemen. And thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
All right. Good
Thank you all
night,
very much.
everyone. Stay warm.
Good night. Take care.
Bye.